working on between the University of Plymouth, Historic England, and the University of Birmingham. And you heard from Anne earlier about the archaeobotanical side of things. So I'm going to be talking more about the pollen side of things. And we're investigating human land use impacts on biodiversity change in the British Isles. So open science presents many opportunities. There's been a lot of literature and media coverage in recent years that has really highlighted the importance of open science approaches and moving towards big data science as well. And the university's UK open science policy now states that all UK publicly funded research and data should be made available to the public for free, and highlights how this makes research more transparent, rigorous, efficient, and stimulates more engagement between different disciplines and with stakeholders as well. So there's been a lot of positivity in the move towards open science. But despite these positive initiatives, there are many challenges associated with open science. So, for example, the communication barriers between different disciplines, between academic and non-academic audiences of data. There are challenges around data control, the quality of data, and methodological differences. And so there are many challenges that need to be addressed in the future as we amalgamate data and make these data sets available to user groups. There's also the issues around acknowledgement and authorship, making sure people are given full credit for their data, especially when it moves into the realm of large data, big data situations. Now, in a recent magazine, Pages magazine article, this is the Past Global Changes, all about sustaining the Earth's environmental biodiversity. There's an article that highlighted how important it is for the stakeholder engagement and new ways of thinking to really make use of all these large data sets that are emerging and are becoming more usable by different groups. So this diagram shows the current position of paleoecology, which is the area of research that I work in, and how it can potentially link to different disciplines, particularly in neoecology, how we can optimize this in the future with new connections between these disciplines. So thinking about some personal experiences related to open science, going back to my PhD more than 10 years ago, so I started with using open science sources immediately with the European Diatom database, which provided training sets of modern data to reconstruct climate change, and also provided a species identification archive, which was so valuable. And ever since then, every project I've worked on has involved using and producing open science data, largely using the European Pollen database through a range of different projects, and then at the end of projects, archiving outputs into Pangea, so that the wider scientific community can make use of those outputs. So next I'll move on to the biodiversity and land use projects, linked to Anne's talk from earlier. So European biodiversity patterns have been shaped by humans over very long timescales, with activities such as deforestation, grazing animals, settlement having large impacts. Biodiversity plays an important role in ecosystem functioning and habitat recovery following disturbance. So it's important to understand the long-term context of biodiversity and ecological change, particularly in relation to changing human land use. So this project aims to reconstruct, using long-term data set to reconstruct and explain the changing patterns of biodiversity through the Holocene. We draw upon a range of databases that are publicly available, largely. So you already heard about the archaeobotany from Anne earlier. So we use fossil pollen as indicators of land cover and landscape diversity, vegetation change. use fossil insect data sets, largely from the BugCP database and the work of David Smith, a collaborator on the project. We also make use of radiocarbon dated archaeological sites that come from a large number of different open access databases, which are used as an indicator of changes in human population change. And we're also using past climate data sets from the NOAA database. And also, I thought I'd mention that we also make use of a range of R packages that people have written and shared and made these openly available for others, which is so valuable in being able to apply different data analysis techniques and, and identify the drivers and factors associated with environmental change. So the development of pollen data availability has been an open science journey. There's been a large increase in data volumes over the last around 10 years. Data amalgamation has largely been initiated by the Landclim project, and the community nature of this gathering of data has really benefited from the integration of researchers and the opportunity to co-author through the process. So the map on the left shows the pollen sites that are available in 2012. These are the triangles on the map. So this was a publication from 2014. And then in the middle, we can see the BPOL UK meta database produced by Michael Grant, which shows the potential distribution of this resource of fossil pollen data. But actually a key step in using potential data is finding out which sites are usable and useful. So this is quite a process to eliminate sites that can't be used due to chronological issues or data quality. So there are many steps along the way. So we move from identifying 700 usable records with enough radiocarbon dates and covering from the right kind of site that can allow us to understand the wider landscape. And then on the right, you can see how many data sets have actually been collected. And this is all about access to data. So there are two methods I've been using to collect data. It's either to contact original data producers and offer them the chance to be involved in research and contribute data, or to digitize very old diagrams, because a lot of the time the data aren't available anymore. The people have lost the original files, or there just isn't the technology to read the data anymore. So digitizing very old diagrams sounds like it could be a great approach, but it's actually very challenging to get a good quality digitized diagram. So this map shows the distribution of sites that we've gathered for this research. So this is the slightly earlier version. Now we've gathered a lot more pollen data. This was published this year, and the other data sets are currently being gathered at the same time, such as Anne and Ruth's efforts on the archaeobotany. So this figure presents a synthesis of these data sets, the current synthesis over the last 10,000 years, and we can see notable increases in human population, which reflects the radiocarbon dated archaeological sites that are used as a proxy for population change, shown by the blue bars, which coincide with the loss of forest, which is the green bars on the diagram, and increased agricultural activity, such as through cereals and grazing indicators, and changes in insect groups to those associated with human activities and grazing animals. We also find patterns between climate and diversity change through time. And vegetation diversity increased most notably as landscapes became more open with early agriculture, and we see a recent decline in landscape evenness, which shows that indicates that vegetation is becoming increasingly dominated by specific types of plants. So this shows that the relationship between population and land cover and diversity is not straightforward, And understanding the way that people use the land is the missing part of this puzzle, which is where the archaeobotanical data will be able to help us address these questions. So some key questions that emerge when thinking about modern biodiversity conservation are: how diverse were past landscapes, and what does this mean at the landscape scale? What should be conserved, and is this the number of species, or is it landscape heterogeneity, or other aspects of functional diversity? And we hope to be able to analyse and delve into this data in more detail to be able to start to answer these kind of questions. So current activities. So we've been undertaking a large-scale data compilation exercise, which is near completion, to fill gaps in the regional coverage of data. We plan to explore different approaches for understanding the emergence of diversity and ecological novelty using the range of different data sets that are available. We're also carrying out a questionnaire of current landscape management and restoration projects in the UK to find out what kind of knowledge gaps exist at the moment and how this long-term perspective could potentially answer questions about modern environmental management and understanding of biodiversity. So one approach that I mentioned earlier to gathering data is around using a digitisation process of old diagrams. So I'm just showing you an example here. This uses Digitised software, which is a piece of software developed and made open access by a PhD student in Switzerland. And he's been extremely helpful with using the software. It's a really great piece of software for a good diagram, but there are a lot of challenges around producing a reliable digitisation of an old diagram. So this example I'm showing for Hockham Mere because I have the original data for this site as well, so I was able to compare. So the part of the dashed square on the diagram is the part of the plot that's been digitised here. So this actually works rather well when we compare with the original data, which is the green bars. But you can see that some data points do get missed occasionally. So betula of birch towards the bottom of the plot. There's the digitised version is showing a spike in the betula that's not reflected in the original data. So it's quite a complex process, and there are differences in the way that people used to record their pollen taxa, that it's hard to get back to the real data. People used to use different axes, change their axis through a diagram, and that makes it a lot more complicated when you're dealing with hundreds of taxa in a diagram. So it's always better to be able to use original real data if possible rather than digitising, but it's a useful alternative when data is no longer available. So the quality of the digitisation did actually lead to me excluding about 30 sites from the analyses. So I'll finish with some take-home messages. So open science facilitates robust, reproducible research with wider benefits to society. Some of the key barriers include standardisation and harmonisation and data management. So we find that there are challenges around taxonomic harmonisation in the pollen community, because some people will combine different species together into a genera level, whereas other people will split it into individual species, and there's lots, and people call the same thing different things. So it's quite a large exercise in harmonising a large number of data sets. And there are also chronological issues that have to be resolved as well. So if we want to compare data on across broad regions, we need everything to be on a reliable chronological scale to allow that comparison. So we have to be quite selective about what data we include that have good radiocarbon dating. So in terms of this research, open science is key to allowing us to explore these relationships between land use and biodiversity on different spatial scales, and really depends on synthesizing these additional data sets through collaboration. The journey towards open access data has involved a number of key steps, particularly around the taxonomic harmonisation and chronologies. There are We find that there are diminishing returns of adding extra data sets over time. So it is tempting just to go on forever collecting more and more data, but actually it makes little difference in the end to the overall interpretations by adding a few more data sets, and the data sets get shorter and shorter over time as we collect the more detailed long-term data sets. So we can use make some good use of digitising data, but it's always better to seek original data and include original authors where possible. Overall, I've been really pleased with the positive response from the Pollen community when seeking data, and I think everyone I've approached has agreed to have their data then made open access at the end of the project, so then that can be contributed back to the community as a data set that's been harmonised, and new chronologies have been created. So it's nice to be able to produce data as well as consume data along the way. So thank you very much. I'll just finish with some acknowledgements and happy to answer questions. Thank you.